Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. In the first segment of today's show, we're going to discuss Donald Trump's decision to finalize the U.S. withdrawing from the WHO, the World Health Organization. And we're also going to discuss how Muslim doctors in the U.S. are now becoming less and less in number, up to 15% less now. And all of this is due to the immigration ban, the travel ban that's been placed on several Muslim countries, making the U.S. a less attractive place for Muslim doctors and those who want to train as doctors to travel to. Now, both of those things put together do make for a concerning public health crisis in the country, as in the middle, of course, of a coronavirus pandemic and in the middle of the fact that the U.S. has a shortage of doctors at this point in time, and the fact that the U.S. has not yet been able to find a vaccine either. So how exactly is Donald Trump planning to then cooperate with the rest of the world when it comes to vaccines? And secondly, to be able to deal with the shortage of doctors within his own country by making his country even less attractive and more isolated. And how does that really work? Let's discuss that further when I join Mary Andes, who is a master's in global health and public policy from the University of Edinburgh. She's worked with the BBC and Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health regarding public health issues. She's joining us now for this morning from Harrisburg in Pennsylvania. Mary, thanks very much for your time this morning. What do you make of, firstly, the decision to walk away from the WHO, even Republican senators at this point in time saying, how on earth are we supposed to cooperate on a vaccine if we're not even part of that organization?
That's exactly right. Even within Donald Trump's party, he's facing, people who are unhappy with this decision. And it just, quite frankly, is not a smart move at this point. If the President of the United States wants to leave the WHO, I think that a conversation could be had about that. I think doing it during the biggest pandemic we've seen in more than 100 years is not the time to do it. I think it will end up hurting America and, the cause of finding a vaccine across the world. I think it's not a good move, not a smart move. And I do think it's interesting that it would happen next July when Donald Trump would potentially no longer be president. There's an election in November. So it kind of depends on who gets elected, how that's going to go, which I think is an interesting note to consider when you think about us leaving.
Indeed, and on that issue of the vaccine, right, which is something of major concern for all of us around the world, really, but should be of concern to a U.S. president, especially considering his country has the highest number of cases around the world right now, and those cases seem to only be on the up on a daily basis. What do you make of how this will affect that sort of cooperation as well, just when it comes to even America's own interests?
I think that right now, WHO is the global coordinator for the vaccine. They're tracking a variety of tests across different borders. And like you said, the United States needs a vaccine more than anyone. I just don't think it's a smart move. I think a lot of, like I said, even people within Trump's own party realize that cutting us off from, the person who's, the organization that's coordinating all of this, who's bringing it all into one place, who's funding research, cutting us off from that is it's not helping us, and it's not helping the rest of the world. We're all losing in this scenario if we leave, and it just seems like a horrible time to do so.
Indeed, and there is a concern, Mary, about how at this point in time, when we're talking about what may very well happen vis-a-vis a vaccine and vis-a-vis how U.S. doctors are dealing with the situation, with this now, if I may bring in the issue of the Muslims who are coming in less numbers to register or to study as doctors or to even undergo a certification process within that country. Added together, these two issues make the U.S. a very unattractive place, don't they, for those who want to even become doctors and or work as physicians?
Absolutely. I mean, we're really cutting off our nose to spite our face in this issue. We're not making the U.S. look attractive for new doctors or new students for medicine or healthcare. We're losing doctors as they go elsewhere, and it's just, we're cutting ourselves off from the international community when we most need it. And like you said, it's kind of a couple different things that are working to decrease the number of immigrant doctors coming in or immigrant students. And it's like I said, it's just cutting off our nose to spite our face. We're not benefiting from it at all. And certainly the rest of the world isn't benefiting either.
Very well. Let's add another voice conversation. We're now joined by Professor John E. McDonough, who is a professor of practice at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He's joining us this morning from Boston, Massachusetts. John, we sincerely appreciate your taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us here in Scope. What do you make, John, firstly, of the withdrawal from the WHO, the World Health Organization? How detrimental will that be to cooperation at a time when, A, the U.S. is going through a pandemic in which the numbers are very, very high, specifically within the country, and secondly, where the rest of the world and the U.S. are trying to seemingly come together to find a vaccine?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm not at all convinced that the United States will, in fact, leave the World Health Organization. All signs right now indicate that President Trump will not be reelected in the November election. His opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden, has indicated that he would cancel the withdrawal from the WHO on his first day in office. So I think you need to reserve judgment before you assume that this will happen. I think at the end of the day, the United States will do the right thing and will stay an important part of the World Health Organization.
Okay, so I ask you about the second issue that we were going to discuss today about Muslim doctors, right? And I know that as far as doctors throughout the U.S., Muslim doctors, I believe, just make up, I believe the number is around 4.5% or less of the doctors in the U.S. But nevertheless, 15% of those compared to last year and the years before, there are 50% less now Muslim doctors who are choosing to go to the U.S. To become physicians there and or to go through a certification process. This is at a time when the U.S. already has a shortage, right, of doctors to meet its needs. All of this put together, as I put to Mary, both the decision on the WHO as well as this issue of the Muslim ban, travel ban, however you want to term it, they make the U.S. an unattractive place, don't they, currently at least, as we're speaking, for health professionals?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It has sent off very bad messages around the world in terms of the United States as a place to study and to get your skills. I think that we will get through this. I don't think that this will be long lasting, and we will see a very different reception in terms of who's welcome to come into this country within a short period of time. So this is an aberration what the United States is going through right now, and I don't think it will be long lasting beyond this year.
You know, Mary, we're still, as I said, very much in the middle of a pandemic. The elections are in November, so there's a significant amount of time still left, right, for this pandemic to work its way through. Will Donald Trump be able to do the right thing before even those elections come around?
I'm not optimistic about that, to be honest. I think that the election can absolutely be a huge change that will improve a lot of things in our country, including our relationship with the WHO. But I'm not sure that we can look at anything for that before Trump is out of office. I think that in a variety of ways, like you're saying, we're making our country unwelcome to a lot of people that we need to welcome. We need those people who come and study to be doctors. And I personally don't blame anyone for looking at what Trump is saying and doing in our country and choosing not to come there as an international student. So I want to believe that maybe something can shift, something can happen, and Trump can kind of see what's happening and maybe address some of those things. But considering we're in the situation we're in, which is just so unheard of, I cannot imagine what could happen to change Trump's attitude and behavior before November.
You know, John, it does seem like I'm just bashing Trump, right? So there are U.S. politicians who have said, even Democrats, said that, sure, if the president does have legitimate concerns about the WHO, let's discuss those. Let's discuss ways to present reforms to the WHO. Let's not completely walk away from it. But then in the midst of the pandemic, as I put to Mary, we still have a number of months left till November. So things can potentially become a lot worse, can't they, if the U.S. is still not completely cooperating with the WHO?
First of all, the U.S. is cooperating with the WHO. Even right now, Dr. Fauci, our head of infectious disease at the National Institutes for Health, has said he is continuing to work with WHO on a daily basis. It's important to understand this withdrawal is done in the lens of the president facing a quite difficult reelection effort, looking for other entities to blame for the horrible situation in the United States right now with the virus and two of his targets are China and WHO. And there are legitimate issues to be talked about with both, but the scope and the severity and the damage being done by the pandemic in the United States right now is primarily the responsibility of the United States itself. But this is the pattern of this president, always looking for someone else to blame when something goes wrong, that people can legitimately say, what were you doing?
I'll give you the final word then before I let you both go. On the issue of Dr. Fauci himself, right, just over the past day or so, and it's not a new issue, of course, but the president has very publicly disagreed with Dr. Fauci as well when it comes to the most basic of issues when it comes to how to deal with the pandemic, be it masks or otherwise. In this tug of war, if I may call it that, between public health officials appointed by Trump and others, as well as Trump, who do you think is really going to win out at the end of the day? I mean, will logic win?
Oh, I'm very confident science and logic will win, and the scientists will prevail. The scientists are prevailing. The president, for the past 6 months now, has continuously attempted to wish the virus away. There's a saying in public health, you hope for the best and you plan for the worst. This president is engaged entirely in wishful thinking, and we are suffering very severe consequences because of that. We're not the only nation, but we're the leading nation right now on the cutting edge of just extraordinary damage. And this is a difficult time. This is a real failure of leadership, and this will not last. I'm very confident of that.
Very well. We'll leave it there at that optimistic note. That was John and Mary speaking to us this morning. Mary speaking to us from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and John was speaking to us there from Boston, Massachusetts. We appreciate, of course, their time and their expert insight as both trained public health experts. One of the issues, of course, is the main one is that of the U.S. walking away from the WHO. As John there had put, of course, we do know that there is a 1-year deadline for that to actually occur. So in July 2021 is, in fact, when we would potentially see that occurring. But if Donald Trump were to lose the elections at the end of this year and Joe Biden were to win, again, hypothetically, Biden has already said he would reverse that and would not walk away from the WHO and would continue to cooperate with that global or international organization. Now, at the same time, though, we do have this travel ban in place as well, which is making the U.S. a very unfriendly place, right, for even those who want to become medical professionals or who are medical professionals and wanted to then be certified to work in the U.S. The U.S. badly needs more doctors. There is a shortage of doctors on a yearly basis for the past number of years in the U.S. And of course, there is uber pressure right now on the U.S. health system as well within this pandemic. Is it a smart thing for both of these sorts of issues to now be combining and making the U.S. an even less attractive place for others from around the world to then share their health expertise and medical expertise with? I'll be back with my next segment after this break. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here in Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this segment, we're going to discuss the attacks that have taken place, or the purported attacks that have taken place within Iran, those explosions that have taken place in many parts of that country. The most important one, arguably, was the one at the Natanz nuclear facility, which caused significant damage, even according to the Iranians themselves. Now, Avigdor Lieberman, a right-wing Israeli politician, has come out and has accused the Mossad chief of being the source who leaked information to the New York Times. The New York Times has then claimed that Israel was behind specifically that attack and possibly the other explosions as well. Now, the Iranians have so far been denying that Israel has been behind any of the explosions in the country. Nevertheless, though, state media has been saying and or warning, essentially, the Israelis that if they continue to try to create the impression that they were behind this, that in and of itself would carry serious risks for Israel. Now, it's no secret that cyber attacks back and forth have been occurring between Iran and Israel. We had just a decade ago the Stuxnet virus, which really hurt Iran's nuclear program at that time. And the Iranians, of course, possibly have retaliated in the years since. Just recently, we had 6 Israeli water plants in April that were attacked by a cyber attack. The Israelis blamed that on the Iranians as well. What should we make of these back and forth cyber attacks? And this seemingly is a huge escalation in that regard, is it not? Let me put that to our guest. We're now joined by Nicolai Due-Gundersen, who is with the UN Institute for Training and Research. He's also the author of The Privatization of Warfare. He's joining us now from London. Joining us from Penang, Malaysia, is Hamoon Khelghat-Doost, who is a PhD in political science from the National University of Singapore. His research areas include human security and security impacts of radicalization in the Middle East. Hamoon and Nicolai, thank you both for your time today. Hamoon, let me start with you. What do you make of the attack, if it is an attack, really, on Natanz? What do you think may have occurred? Do you think the Israelis were behind that?
Well, I really believe that Israel or groups related to Israel or any kind of state near to, close to Israel have been behind the attacks back in Natanz. There are evidences indicating that because Iran being a country which is securitized in many ways, and penetration to this country is very difficult, and also there would be only very few countries that they can take the advantage of attacking Iran in this scale. And Israel is certainly one of them. Looking at the scale of the attack and also at the patterns of the attack, I certainly can say that, in my personal opinion, that Israel has been behind this attack. How this has been happened, it is something that's being argued. Some people believe that this attack has been done by air raid, airstrikes, rather by the aircrafts or by the drones. Some people are saying that explosives have been moved and have been taken into the facilities. But what I can actually conclude from the evidences that we have nowadays is that, yes, Israel most probably has been behind the attacks to Natanz.
So then, Nicolai, if we are to presume that the Israelis were behind this attack in Natanz, this is a huge escalation, isn't it, back and forth between these two? And this would pretty much, if we're honest, mark the first direct attack from Israel onto Iran?
Well, I think here we have to consider the previous accusations that Israel has had over cyber attacks and also assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists from 2010 to 12. But I think the main message sent here, no matter who is responsible, and I do think Israel is responsible, is Iran's vulnerability. Let's remember that Iran has had to deal with fallout from the nuclear deal not working out. And at some point, they basically said, if this deal is not honored, we will start to stockpile. We will go back to uranium enrichment. Now, obviously, this incident, which was an explosion, shows, to what extent can Iran actually push back. They are very vulnerable right now. Let's not forget that at a time of COVID-19 and ongoing sanctions against Iran, their economy is basically crippled. So an attempt to stockpile and create nuclear capability has now been attacked. And there are sources as of this morning who claim that this explosion has set back their ambitions by over a year. And I think that that was the main issue, that Iran is actually quite vulnerable at this point.
Okay, so then, we can all agree essentially that Iran is very vulnerable because of the pressure that it's under from the U.S. and others in this current situation. But the Iranians would be forced to retaliate, would they not? And considering this was an attack on a nuclear facility as important as Natanz, I imagine the retaliation will be just as severe?
Well, retaliation is something that Iranian wants it for sure, but whether or not they can be capable of doing that is a huge question mark about it. I strongly believe that Iran's options for retaliation, especially in the matter of military way, is very much limited for different reasons. First and foremost, Iran does not have the technological and also intelligence capabilities of conducting such an attack in that scale into the soil of Israel at the same time. Iran is very much dependent on its proxy allies in the region, especially those in Lebanon and also the Palestinian territory. But for different reasons, they are not in the best shape of themselves to take revenge on behalf of Iran. At the same time, as the other commentator made it clear, COVID-19 and also the crippling sanctions of the United States on Iran has put the economy of the country on the verge of collapse. And quite a number of Iranian officials have warned the state about the possibilities of upcoming uprising by the people. So the situation back home is very much critical, and Iran does not want to escalate the situation that they have it right now. And more importantly, it's very important to realize that in October this year, Security Council of the United Nations will be reviewing the possibility of lifting Iran's arms embargo. Yeah. Any kind of overt military retaliation of Iran would definitely put the position of the country in a very big situation in the Security Council. So I don't think at the moment Iran would do something overtly. Perhaps what they call it strategic patience would be something that Iran would be chose at this period of time.
All right, let's add another to this conversation. We're also now joined by Enrica, who is with Gulf State Analytics. She's an analyst with them. She's joining us now on the line from Berlin. Enrica, we appreciate your time today. What do you make of the possibility that Israel may have attacked Iran directly when it came to the Natanz nuclear facility, and the possibility then for retaliation? What does that then mean in the tit-for-tat that would attack, cyber attacks that we've seen between these two in the past?
Well, yeah. I mean, it is a possibility that it's a case of an industrial accident, but I believe, yes, it's probably an act of sabotage, which should be seen as one of these provocation attacks that have been committed against Iran with the final, let's say, goal to restore deterrence from the side of the U.S. and Israel. The fact is that they have not restored deterrence until now, and this last incident, if it is a case of sabotage, I think it will just work as an act of provocation, which will raise tensions. And as we have seen, for instance, in Iraq, in those areas that are still, like Al-Qaim, the north, where still some groups of the Islamic State are still present, the U.S. was forced to leave.
Yeah.
Because Iranian militias are actually controlling the area, and they are not, although fighting the Islamic State, they are not willing to cooperate with the U.S. forces.
So in a sense, Enrica, are you saying that Iran is well placed then to retaliate against this if it is proven that Israel was behind this?
Well, yeah, I mean, understandably so, I would argue. I mean, of course, if the U.S. keeps the strategy of provocation, sabotage, attacks, aiming to provoke Iran, Iran is likely to, let's say, accept the challenge, and it has the means to do so.
All right. Nicolai, let me bring you in because we've seen a lot of things happening back and forth between Iran and the U.S., right? Especially on Iraqi soil, as Enrica there had pointed out. Do you think that will become then again the setting for further back and forth between the U.S.? Because for the Iranians as well, they would group in, wouldn't they, the Israelis and the Americans together into one adversarial group?
Yes, I mean, we've seen discourse or rhetoric continuing regarding Israel and the U.S. basically being against Iran. I believe that the U.S. has also mentioned that they would strike or consider launching strikes against Iran if nuclear stockpiling reaches a certain stage. At the same time, as one of my colleagues mentioned, the idea of strategic patience, I'm not sure if I totally agree that Iran will take that route, but let's remember that recently it was found by a UN report that the killing of Iran's Qasem Soleimani was unlawful. This is a UN expert who has said that Trump's drone strike was not legal. And if we couple that with the notion that the UN may help with sanctions relief, Iran might take a more patient tone. At the same time, I think this is a country that feels it's being pushed into a corner, and so I think there will be military leaders, or the military aspect of governance would want retaliation.
Hamoon, I'll give you the word before I let you all three go. You've spoken about strategic patience, but as we know, as Nicolai there mentioned, with the Soleimani assassination as well, it seems that there's a lot of pressure, I would imagine, domestically within Iran to do something, right? Because at this point, it's like the country keeps being attacked, and if it doesn't do anything, that almost makes it look even more vulnerable.
Well, I totally understand what you are talking about, and totally agree with the concept. However, one thing that is very important to realize is that the role of Israel in this attack has not been recognized by the Iranian government yet officially. So that is the case that we are saying. For example, in the case of the Qasem Soleimani's assassination in Iraq, it was clearly accepted by the by the United States and also by Iran that it was United States responsible for this attack. But for the time being, the Iranian government has not issued any kind of official announcement about who has been behind these attacks, and actually recognizing Israel as the country behind this attack actually gives a lot of credit to the Israeli forces, and that is not something that Iranian wants for the Iranian public to be shown, because it would be going against 41 years of propaganda against Israel, and that Israel is not capable of doing anything. So now publicly, officially admitting that Israel has been capable of attacking us, has been capable of coming to our soil in Tehran, the capital city, and destroy something that is very, very important to us, it would be quite a problematic thing later on for Iranian government to justify it to its hardcore believers everywhere in the country.
Very well. We'll leave those apart, but we appreciate all three of our guests. That was Hamoon, who was speaking to us from Penang in Malaysia. Nicolai was speaking to us from London, and Enrica was speaking to us from Berlin. We appreciate, of course, their expert insight and putting this into context for us. There's a lot to discuss, right? There's a lot to unravel. Is it possible that Israel was able to sabotage in some way the Natanz nuclear facility, get in there and attack it somehow? Was it a cyber attack? Was it a direct attack? I mean, there are even rumors about an F-35 plane flying into Tehran over the Natanz facility and attacking it. But would Israel really take that risk of doing so? Unlikely, possibly. But I mean, at this point in time, anything is really possible between this back and forth that we've seen. I mean, just 10 years ago, as I put in my introduction, we had that Stuxnet virus, which really hurt the Iranian nuclear program. Will the Iranians retaliate at this point? There has not been an admission by Iran at this point in time, at least, that the Israelis were behind this Natanz incident. Nevertheless, this is something that we need to keep an eye on, because if it is proven that it's Israel, then this would be a huge escalation, as everyone has said, and Iran would be forced in some ways to retaliate. How would it retaliate? Would it retaliate directly against Israel, or would it do something towards U.S. forces in Iraq or Lebanon or otherwise? There's a lot of options in Iran's hands, as well, as Enrica there had also mentioned. I'll be back with my final segment after this. Welcome back, viewers. You're still here on Scope with me, Waqar Rizvi. In this segment, we're going to discuss the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, in fact, as was mentioned in our previous segment, but we're going to hone in on the United Nations. And one of its investigators has, in fact, called that assassination by the U.S. unlawful, saying it was an arbitrary killing, that the U.S. was not able to prove that Soleimani in any way was actually a threat to American interests, even though, of course, the U.S. has a list of accusations that it has against Soleimani, against what he may have possibly done, but there's no evidence presented, at least to the UN at this point in time, in that regard. What does that mean? Does the U.S. really even care? At this point, the U.S. has condemned that report by Agnes Callamard, saying that she was wrong in her assessment of the U.S. rights and justification for killing Soleimani. You'll remember, of course, that Soleimani was not killed in Iran. He was, in fact, killed in a third country, Iraq. And that's why this makes this so much more messy, because Iraq has become, as we've understood, the battlefield, essentially, between the Iranians and the Americans. Let's discuss that a bit further. We're now joined by Tugrul Keskin, who is a professor and director of the Center for Global Governance at Shanghai University and Khelghat-Doost University. He's joining us now from Istanbul. Tugrul, as always, we appreciate you taking your time out to speak with us here in Scope. What do you make of the UN investigators' assessment? Was the killing of Soleimani unlawful?
Yeah, according to the report, basically, this is the illegal killing or assassination. But it was an important stage for the United States and Iran, actually, because he was killed in a third country, so it was very important. And Soleimani has been, was very active in the region as a part of the Revolutionary Guards and part of the Iranian security establishment. He played a very important role, actually, in Iraq, especially after the occupation of the United States, and bringing the Shia groups together and organizing them, creating the network, vast network in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon. I am not sure whether he was a threat to the United States, and according to United States national security, basically, he was a threat to the U.S. national security interest. I might disagree with this. Soleimani was not a threat to the United States, but was a threat to Israel, actually, on the other hand, especially the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Soleimani was very active in Lebanon and among the Palestinians as well. And we see from the Trump administration, U.S. foreign policy has changed actually since the Obama left the administration. And the nuclear deal between United States and Iraq, the United States was broken by the United States actually. So it was a very interesting time we live in today, and this will fuel the tension between United States and Iran in the region. I don't think it's good for the Middle East and in the region and the people in the region actually. So we will see more chaotic developments in the Middle East after this actually.
I guess the issue, right, Tugrul, is that the UN is essentially calling the US out and saying you can't do as you wish, right? And not all of us will always have to just believe you blindly. But at the same time, no one is expecting accountability. I mean, there's no one who can actually hold the US accountable, can they?
Yeah, I don't think so under these circumstances, especially since the World War II. We have a new world order actually, till today probably, till today. And this new world order was established by the Western powers after the World War II, especially the leading country was the United States. This was a Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States reorganized its own political structure and foreign policy through the different kind of networks. So there's a different kind of threat to the United States. It's coming from the east, Far East, which is the China actually. As we saw, the FBI director talks at the Hudson Institute yesterday, and it was a very interesting approach from my own perspective, including the Soleimani's killing, and the United States broke the deal with Iran. These are directly related with the China and China's new project, Belt and Road Initiative, actually, because Iran is one of the most important partner in the Middle East for China, as well as the Pakistan is the same partner in the Southeast Asia, actually. So United States is also losing its hegemony in the United Nations. So we need to remember this. We cannot make them accountable, but this is a very interesting decision taken by the United Nations. So we will see what will happen actually.
The fact this all occurred, right? The assassination of Soleimani occurred in a third country, as you mentioned as well, in Iraq. That made the entire situation a lot messier, right? And now we're seeing efforts essentially to go after PMUs or PMFs in Iraq, which are aligned with Iranian interests in that country at this point as well. This kind of pressure, right, which the U.S. keeps putting on Iran, even in countries which Iran sees as allies, that again continues to push Iran into a corner, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. Iran has been in a very difficult situation economically. Country has been suffering. Unemployment rate is very high. Food prices is very high actually in Iran. Iran is suffering from this process. But at the same time, when we look at Iran, I think one of the first time Iran has been dominant in Iraq since the Islam was born. Iraq was today, especially not because of the 60% of more than 60% of the population Shias in Iran. Basically, they are moving towards Iran. They are moving towards Iran. They are collaborating with Iran. Therefore, in the domestic politics of Iraq, Iran is a very powerful actor. But who created this situation? The United States occupation, actually. This wasn't the case before the occupation. It's an interesting trend that we will see after this, actually.
So then, talking about the region, right, we have all the countries probably viewing the situation with a lot of concern, because when we had the assassination of Soleimani, we had the Iranians retaliate against U.S. bases in Iraq, and, there was a lot of condemnation from the Iraqis even about that too. But do you think that there will be more of an escalation about this? Because we've already seen those explosions, right, in Natanz as well, which are possibly the role of Israel in that. All of this points to more escalation, doesn't it?
No, we will see. I think everyone is waiting for the election in the United States in November election in 2020. If the Trump wins, we will see more escalation, not just by the United States, but as well as from Iran, because Iran has no choice. Iran is at the corner. The United States pushed Iran at the corner, so Iran, must react, must change its foreign policy towards the region or the United States. Basically, we will see more escalation. But at the same time, Iran is not as powerful as the United States. And the second option, if the Trump lost the election, so we will see different circumstances in the Middle East, probably. Probably neocons and other pro-Israel lobbies, basically, especially in the United States, will not be as powerful as under Trump administration. So we might see least tension between Iran and the United States if the United States goes back to the nuclear deal.
Okay, we'll leave it there. That is our Tugrul, but we sincerely, of course, appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to share your expertise with us. That was Tugrul Keskin speaking to us there from Istanbul. Now, the issue with the attack, of course, on the Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, by the United States on Iraqi soil, even from day one, we had U.S. politicians themselves questioning the Trump administration on whether that was a smart move, whether that was a justified move. And Soleimani, if he really presented a direct threat to the U.S., for the U.S. to then have gone into a third country and killed the man there. Now, the White House has come out against this UN investigator's report, Agnes Callamard, and has condemned her, saying that she's whitewashing Soleimani's role in the region. Now, no one's doing that. This is just about justification when it comes to international law. The other issues can be debated for a later time, but you cannot just go around killing people and officials, high-ranking officials of other countries in other countries. This entire thing defies logic to an extent, does it not? Of course, the U.S. justification, to be fair, is that Soleimani was a threat to them, that Soleimani had attacked U.S. interests in the past. The U.S. claims it has evidence for that, but of course, none of us have seen such evidence at this time. I'll leave it there for now. I've been Waqar Rizvi. Thanks for watching.